I think money has just been taught to us that it's like taboo. It's like a personal thing. You don't talk about it. And so like
you think it's the taboo thing?
Kind of. Yeah. I think people have this, like, there's a stigma around money and you're like, oh, I can't ask him about his personal finances. Like I can't ask her what her credit score is. And then I think there's a certain amount of time where you date and it's like, I don't really want to talk about that stuff because I don't really want to disclose that. Right. But at some point, if it gets serious and you see yourself like wanting to create a future with this person, I think absolutely you need to schedule a time to have an appointment with each other and say like, hey, we need to talk about like how you were raised when it comes to savings or credit or things like that. And it's always an uncomfortable situation because someone will be judged. Welcome back to the Push Podcast. This is episode number 143, and we've been talking about money this May. And so we've done a lot of things. We've taught a money workshop that was hosted in April, on the last Monday of April. If you missed that, you can go to wearethecopelands.com or janellecopeland.com and you can get access to that replay. So that kind of sparked this week's episode, which is 6 money issues that will kill your relationship. And I just think it's important to kind of start there. Money is the root of it's the number one issue in relationships.
Yeah.
We've been there.
Yeah.
We've been there.
And I think because money is tied to like your goals and your aspirations of what you want to do in life. Money is what provides options in your world. It's part of what makes some of your dreams come true, right? And so it holds a lot of the keys to maybe your fulfillment and a lot of other things. But people find themselves in really tough situation when it comes to money and relationships.
So I've been kind of seeing a lot where there's a lot of like Pinterest graphics and just like influencers that I follow that are like, these are things that you need to talk about before you get into a serious relationship. And so we kind of compiled our own, but the hub or the umbrella, I'd say, is just money in general. And then I would say there's 6 key areas. So I'll give them to you and then we'll kind of discuss them, because if money's the number one issue, why divorces happen, relationships don't work, I think we should dive into that and figure out like, well, what can you do to have a good, healthy relationship that you do talk about these things, right?
Well, yeah, name those things and I have a question for you.
Okay, so 1 is money. I'm sorry, the whole thing is money. 1 is savings. 2 is earnings. 3 is debt. 4 is credit. The next is taxes. And number 6 is insurance. And I think it's fair to say in the workshop that we taught kind of like the fact that there's a game, if you will, to each of these. There's a structure in which, you can operate in the parameter of taxes,
right?
But a lot of people don't take the time to learn the game of taxes, right? So an example of that would be like, well, people get themselves in a tax bracket from their earnings. They don't even know what tax bracket they're in. And so then they say things like, well, I don't want to earn more because, I'll just pay more in taxes. Well, if I met a guy like that would be a very silly thing to say, especially because my follow-up question would be like, well, what tax bracket are you in?
Well, yeah.
And then if you don't even know how much you're paying right now, then how do you know, like, what's the barrier, the breaking point to get into the next one? And then I'd be irritated because I'm like, so let me get this straight. You're going to stifle your own earnings because you don't know how to play the game, or you don't want to play the game of taxes.
And I think with people, that's an interesting thing, because I think people get bonuses. They think about, and the first thing they're kind of upset by is the taxes. And I get it. Like we all get, like you get a bonus, it gets taxed differently than when you on your regular earnings. And so sometimes you can be cynical with or pessimistic with when it comes to bonuses and things of that nature. But I think that if you know the game and if you know what to do with that money and all the different things, like you can really look at it from a really different perspective and be more optimistic about more income. I think the idea of reducing or maybe even being upset by your income because it's being taxed just means that you haven't understood the game.
Yeah.
Right. But my question is that you name those 6 things, and those 6 things are super, super important. But to the root of it, because we're talking about like relationships, right? So to the root of it, what makes it so difficult to talk about money in a relationship? What, like, because you get into this relationship, like you paint the picture, like, oh,
We're
we dating and everything is good, and I think money and kids kind of have the same effect on a relationship, right? Like things get real. But what do you think it is? Like, is it that people don't want to mix what feels good with what is non-emotional, like what should be probably a non-emotional thing involved in an emotional kind of cocktail in a sense?
I think money has just been taught to us that it's like taboo. It's like a personal thing. You don't talk about it. And so like
You think it's the taboo thing?
Kind of. Yeah. I think people have this, like, there's a stigma around money and you're like, oh, I can't ask him about his personal finances. Like I can't ask her what her credit score is. And then I think there's a certain amount of time where you date and it's like, I don't really want to talk about that stuff because I don't really want to disclose that. Right. But at some point, if it gets serious and you see yourself like wanting to create a future with this person, I think absolutely you need to schedule a time to have an appointment with each other and say like, hey, we need to talk about like how you were raised when it comes to savings or credit or things like that. And it's always an uncomfortable situation because someone will be judged, right?
Yeah. And so it's interesting because I think it is like when you said that at first, I was like, is it really taboo? But I guess when you think about it, like you're kind of taught to not talk about money in the workplace because everybody makes different different incomes in the workplace. So that's a big thing that you don't talk about. You also don't share with your friends because bragging and all these different things that we associate with money. Like we associate so much of our interpersonal relationships with the fact that that's something we don't have to worry about talking about. That's going to interfere with our ability just to like be in this relationship.
Well, they say you're not supposed to talk about money, politics, religion. Money is part of that.
Right.
But here's an example of why it's taboo. Our daughter, Jasmine, she's 20. And I remember she got a new job. She works for Apple. That's great. Someone asked her like, well, how much are they offering you? Like, how much are you making? And she said, that's kind of a personal question. And I was like, as you should. Like, don't be telling people how much you make. So when I say it's taboo, that's what I mean. Like, you're not really supposed to be telling people how, like if we have a launch, what we do in business, someone's not going to say, oh, wow, that's what you do for a living. How much do you make doing that?
Yeah.
Well, that's personal.
It's so funny because there's a level of like, you're entering the job space, right? You've been in the job space for some time. Are you talking
about a young person?
A young person, but hear me out. So you're making a certain income and it's private.
Right.
Right? And then you get to a place where you make more money and it's still kind of private, but people kind of have an idea of what you make. But then you get to a place where you're making serious money and everybody knows how much you make. Like you think about like people that run companies, like their salaries are public, right? You know how much the CEO of Tesla makes. Like you know how much Jeff Bezos makes. Like all those things become really public, and all of a sudden they get demonized because of how much they make. But it's interesting how like that relationship with money changes when you get out of the perspective of what people think they can earn.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've talked about like, you don't hate on celebrities because you think it's far out from what you can accomplish, but you hate on your friend that has some improvements in their life. Right? Or you see someone on Instagram because you think that that's in the realm of what you can achieve. And so maybe that's part of this whole dynamic of money. But when it gets into the relationship, like all those things have to go away. Like now you have to be transparent. Like this is how much I make. This is like what I have in savings. This is what I have in.
But the thing is like in our money workshop, the number one thing is people get defensive around their money beliefs. Well, I was taught yesterday, I was in Lululemon, which is very expensive leggings, right? You either love Lululemon and you find a way to buy Lululemon leggings, or you're like, that is ridiculous. I would never spend $128 on leggings, right? And I happen to like Lululemon, but there was a time we couldn't afford it, right? And so I like it. But there's also like, I have no problem buying a $5 Target t-shirt. Like there's certain things, I don't want to be squatting in the gym and you can see through my clothes. Like it's just not, I'm going to buy the expensive leggings, but I also have Lululemon leggings that I've had now for 9 years. So the quality is there. Anyways, I was in the Lululemon store waiting for Jordan to try something on, and this woman in there was talking about the fact that she was considering a Tesla. And she said, but I can't bring myself to do it. They're too expensive, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, consider what you're saving on gas. And she said, well, my dad always taught me that a car is never an investment. It's always like a bad purchase. So you should buy something cheap. You should pay it off. It should be used. And I just thought to myself, it's so interesting. She's probably 55 years old and she's still holding on to this belief. So I just told myself, I'm not going to waste my time talking to her, because nothing I say to her is going to change the position that she has about a car. And also, I don't work for Tesla, so I don't make a commission whether you buy it or not. So the point is hold on to that belief if that's what you believe, and I don't want to argue with you about it.
Yeah.
So people get very territorial and defensive over what they know to be true about money. And so bringing that into a relationship, right? If I have a friend who, which I do, is now like dating someone, they talk about money, she owns a home, he does not. Well, you know, he wasn't raised where you have to chase the American dream and you've got to own a property, and like, so that's not a value of his.
Right.
Now, what they can do to not help or to not let it affect their relationship is they can say, well, here's another way to look at it. Well, have you considered this? Like, here are the benefits, or hear each other out, right? So when it comes to now bringing your finances together, you're talking about like, well, does she have a savings, but he doesn't? Like, he's maybe not good at saving his money because he wants to live his life, right? And maybe she's really frugal. I'm just giving examples. Maybe when it comes to earning, like if we got together and I was like, hey, you know, I want to earn more, and you were like, nope, we're good right here because life's not about money, and you know, you shouldn't chase money, and we're comfortable and we have just enough. Okay, well, I want a vacation, or you know.
So how do you, like, that's a tough thing to deconstruct that, because to your first example, if one person wants to have a home ownership, the other person doesn't see the value in that, and they say, well, what's the point, right? And you're getting into this relationship, is it enough to say this is not going to work?
I think love is not enough to say like, well, we love each other, so we'll work it out, right?
So the money situation outweighs the love piece.
Yeah, it will over time.
Yeah, because I think it will like deteriorate the love, because at one point, like, everyone has a sense of self-interest, right? The vision that they have for their life. Back to your point with the money beliefs, they see themselves based on their belief system around money, and they're acting that out every single day because that's what they know to be true. And then before you know it, you get into this relationship where someone has a totally different belief system.
Right.
And so somebody's got to compromise in order for that to work, or somebody's got to be more convincing or influential around that aspect or that particular topic, to say, hey, here's the version of the world that you didn't know or didn't see or didn't learn.
I don't think you should use those words.
What?
Like, hey, here's the version of the world that you didn't learn. That's not a good way to say, like, hey.
No, I wasn't role modeling. I wasn't like role playing it. I was just, I was saying that at the end of the day, it comes down to, there's a version of this world, there's a perspective of money that maybe you never tried on before, right? And I want you to try it on, because if we're in this relationship, what are we trying to accomplish together?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point of this episode honestly comes down to money could cause major issues, but these are 6 particular areas that I feel like when you do decide that you're going to have the money talk, that you need to make sure that you're aligned with when it comes to all of these. So another one would be debt, right? Like, I've gone out on a date before we got married, and the guy's credit card gets declined. I'm sorry. I'm running. Like, there is just no, I don't care the way my bank account's set up. Like, I don't care about any of that. I just know your card got declined. You will not be hearing from me. I understand things happen, but I do not want to, especially at this age in my life, I'm not going to stick around to teach you how to not overextend yourself when it comes to debt. Sorry.
What if they said, oh, I had a fraud situation?
I get it. I mean, I get it, but I also don't want to sign up for that.
You would probably tick that off as a red flag. And if you say you need another money red flag.
Here's another one. My girlfriends and I, we talk about, like, when one of them is single, if she dates, we're like, okay, we're going to run a background check and a credit check. Like, you have to know those things. One, is he wanted in any states? But two, is his credit score? What is his FICO score? Like,
Right.
that's important. We're established, we have good credit. We care about money. So she has to have those conversations with anyone she dates around a credit score. Like,
Right.
hey, and I don't think you come out and just say like, hey, so what's your FICO score? I think that you talk about money. You say like, hey, so, do you own a home? What does it look like? Do you have kids? Like, have you been saving for college? Like,
Right.
you have to talk about these things because, I don't think we talked. I mean, we knew what we were getting into, but then, so like, for example, your credit wasn't the best when
Right.
we got married. Why? Because the way that you were raised, or the way that you learned credit
Right.
wasn't the same way
was on the
I
fly.
learned credit.
It was on the fly. Yeah.
And so that was an issue for us when we first got married, right? Then we wanted to buy a home. Well, I didn't run your credit. So when
Right.
we went to buy a home, even though we made good money, like, your credit score brought our score down, right? These
Yeah.
are very sensitive topics to talk about, right? And so,
Right. And especially when like,
and there's shame associated with that.
right. Especially when you learn on the fly when it comes to credit, like you get into it, and when you're in your 20s,
Yeah.
early 20s, you get a credit card, you think it's access to buy things that
You can't afford.
you can't afford, and you can just make little payments.
Right.
There are people that have that belief right now. They got their first
Absolutely.
credit card, like, oh, you telling me I only have to make $10 minimum payment and I can buy this, brand new coat, this brand new outfit, whatever the case may be. And so then what happens is you start to slowly learn through trying to buy a car that your credit's not good. And then you learn all these little things like I did, right?
Yep.
And then you get into a relationship where someone like yourself understood early on the power of credit, and then now you're like, oh man, I'm bringing us down,
Right.
And now because of that, I'm costing us more money,
Right.
to purchase a home, to do these things. And then not only that, but the baggage is still not
Taken care of. Yeah.
right? And so now it's not only costing more from an interest rate standpoint, but it also now we got to fix
Yeah.
the thing that I struggled with when I was 22 years old.
Right.
And so I think those are things that people still struggle with even when they're 5-10 years into marriage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was hard for us, but what would we tell ourselves? Because that was our exact situation for those of you listening. Like, we're talking about, like, here's what you do if you start dating someone. So what would we have done different? Because
if I were your parent, I would have
say,
said,
don't marry him.
no, I would say, don't move in with him
Okay.
until he fixes his credit situation
Okay.
on his own. And then once that's fixed, and once that's in lockstep, and you come together and you sit down, you talk about it and say, hey, this is in order. My credit score jumped up 100 points. I'm not going to be bringing us down. Then we can start the planning of our life together, because I don't think that it was fair for me to bring that into our lives until we were solidified. And then you saw that I was bought in long term to changing that.
Well, can I just tell you though, like, we were 25 years old. I was 25 years old, so I didn't have a parent telling me, hey, don't.
Right. I'm just.
So you're using, that's what you're saying you would do for our 20-year-old.
Right.
But if she's 25, 26 years old, you're not the parent saying, hey, don't move in, don't get married. You can't say that.
No, I'm just saying this. You asked me what would we do different. I said,
But
the advice would be to not bring it together. So if you're thinking about getting in a relationship with right now with someone, and you haven't had this talk, have the talk. And if the person's not got their shit together, then give that time to get together before you actually get together, like make your relationship, in place where you're bringing everything together.
So then we wouldn't have lived together for a long time.
But the thing is I probably, no, honestly, I probably would have been really motivated to get that together, because I knew I wanted our lives to be together. So it would have probably changed the way I approached the money quicker.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was inspired to, like, okay, I want us to have our life together. So I'm going to make these changes. I'm going to fix this stuff. I'm going to do all the things I need to do so that I'm not bringing us down.
Well, our lives would have been totally different, considering like we started dating moved in, got pregnant, got married all within 9 months. So
Right.
how would that have been different? Like
It would have been a lot different. I mean, this is a hypothetical conversation.
well, I'm just saying, like, if we're supposed to be giving advice for like
Right.
how to not make these like 6 money killers for your relationship,
Right.
would we have taken that advice and said, hey, well, we're going to not move in? Because the reality is we did get a place and
Well, maybe we wouldn't have bought a house.
okay.
We would have waited to buy the house until that was straightened out.
Well, in our situation, we found a house that we wanted. We needed a house for our kids, and the credit score brought us down. So I bought the house under my name.
Right.
So it worked out. So I think that like having the conversation, laying it out on the table, and then putting a plan together still is an option.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, I think the dad in you
Right.
is speaking right now to
It
our
is.
children. So it's skewing like your decision making because you're wanting our daughters to hear that like you don't be with someone that's going to pull you down.
Well, yes.
And I agree with you, but also it wasn't the case for us.
Right.
So
And,
being transparent.
Yeah, being transparent. I am definitely biased because of who
They're our
I am
daughters,
now,
yeah.
and I had daughters.
Right.
That's my advice that I would give, because I know that here's what I'm saying. I would not change anything
Right.
from our past because we learned a lot. It was painful. It was necessary, and we got to this place, and we worked really hard to get to this place, and our kids are in an amazing situation. So I would not change that.
But I will not let you bring my daughter's credit score down.
Because it's because of the thing that we went through. We were really, really conscious, and we're really deliberate with the guidance that we give our kids when it comes to money. Like Jasmine, I think is off to a really great start. Right. And I think that she will probably own her own home if she continues down this path.
She's going to in the next probably 2 years.
Yeah. And so that is a beautiful thing.
Right.
And so I guess
you're saying letting some guy come in and kind of jack up what we've helped her build
is not going to be allowed.
Yeah.
I will find a way to sabotage that.
Oh my God. So the truth comes out, guys. Your relationship can also be in harm's way if the dad is crazy and wants to come in and be
I'm
overbearing.
getting crazier and crazier as the years go by.
You know, the girls think you are too.
I certainly am.
No shame. So, we're speaking on all of these points from experience, but, and we're using a little bit of humor, but again, I do think with money being the number one issue that pulls couples apart, speaking from experience, it was a difficult time for us to like rebuild this stuff and like go through this. And then once we rebuilt your credit, remember your identity got stolen. And then it was like a whole mess after that.
It was probably by the credit fixing company.
Yeah. I was like, wait, what is happening right now?
But the thing is what would, if I were to give anyone, like if you're entering a relationship right now, or maybe you're in one right now, and the money thing is still really hard. I think one of the things that we try to, even to this day, is try to take the emotion out of the conversation and really look at your finances as a business, right? Because I think when you do that, then you make better decisions. And you
like what? Tell me how you
like
mean.
you look at it and maybe you're talking about like, instead of saying like how much you make, maybe you say, okay, let's look at our income. Let's look at like you start using terms that would probably be associated with running a business, because that's what it really is.
Yeah.
Like your finances are your business of like creating opportunities for your life. And then your life and your relationship is like your marriage. And it's within your marriage. It's a bond. There's a lot more, there's emotions to it. There's all the things that you want, experiences, growth, all that. But I do think you need to approach it like in a very non-emotional way, because if you're bringing your ego or if you're bringing your belief systems to it, then what ends up happening is like, then that's where the shame, that's where the emotions come out, because maybe you're not where you want to be. Right.
I think though, anytime you talk about money when it comes to a relationship, it's really difficult to not let your emotions get in the way, because let's just say that I have the bad credit. I'm going to associate all of these stories with, well, this is what I learned. This is, what my parents taught me and I didn't know any better. Right. And like, how did, everybody becomes a victim of their money circumstance. And I didn't buy a house because I couldn't afford it, because I didn't grow up with rich parents like you, and I didn't. And so everyone convinces them that their reality is like, this is the way.
Right.
So it's always going to be a difficult thing. But I just think it has to be started. And then I think it determines the values that you have as a couple, right? So like talking about kids and talking about like, well, what do you think about sending kids to private school? What do you think about private versus public? Because if someone's like, that's a waste of money.
Right.
Okay, well, what about college? College should be optional. I'm like, okay, well, do you not want to save for that stuff? Is that not a good investment? Another thing is like health and wellness, right? Like if you were like, I don't want to pay for a gym membership. Okay, well, are you really frugal and great with your money and you've got a ton of money in the bank? Or do you not see value in investing in health? Because I see value in investing in my health. So if I'm going to buy $200 worth of vitamins every month or go get, physical therapy or whatever, like those things are important to me. So I think it's not just about the money, but it becomes what you value and why you want to earn money, right? Like to me and you, like being able to earn a substantial amount to be able to make an impact and give back is important to us, right? We were talking the other day about like deal breakers. If for whatever reason you had to go on a date, what would be a deal breaker? For me, it's someone cheap, selfish, and not giving, right? So like if I'm on a date with someone and he's being cheap or rude to the server, I'm out. Like I just, if you give 10% as a tip, I'm out. Like that tells me you're not a generous person.
Right.
So I would not continue to date you, Right. And so there are certain values that I think you have to see. And then if you find that you have the same values and you're in alignment, then you start to unfold the money stories and like learn about how maybe you came up with this or, how you formed opinions around this. It's like the other day on the news, we were talking about, is it Amazon being unionized?
Right.
And we share the same, we're in alignment around our beliefs of unions, even though my whole family is in a union, right? So I was raised to believe one thing about unions, but as I became an entrepreneur and as I learned about business, I believe something different now.
Right.
But those are your values. And so like if you can't have a conversation about like you're pro-union, I'm kind of anti-union, if you can't have a conversation and hear each other, that's a bigger problem.
And I'm not saying
no, I know. Not you. Sorry.
But I think that that's true because if you don't find a way to kind of deconstruct and look at each other's values and really start to talk it through to get to a place where you have shared values, that at the end of this, like the root cause to a happy relationship with money in a marriage is shared values. And then there are situations where you say, okay, well, we both value a couple different things that we can coexist.
Okay.
Right. So let's say, for example, I value hobby or having a hobby. Like I want to golf and I know I want to allocate funds to that. And you say, I value leisure and I want to go to spas. Well, then we need to construct our life in a way that we get to share those values and they get to coexist instead of me saying, so you're telling me you're going to spend the money on a massage and you're telling me you're going to spend that money on a golf club. Right. And then you're going to like constantly have this friction, but you have to find things that coexist. But I do think that there has to be there's a shared value of saying, we want to have a house where we share with our family. We want to have multiple properties. We want to have and those are things we say, okay, we're going to aspire to have those. And so every day we're intentional of trying to make that happen instead of fighting one another under the sheets of saying like, well, you want to have the big house, but I said I just want to have a mini house.
Well, one of the things that made me fall in love with you a couple years ago, we looked at a house and it had a huge property. And I was like, this would be great for family reunions. And you were like, absolutely. And I was like, he's a keeper. Like he cares about stuff like this.
Right. And because I think that I learned by spending time with your family and embracing like, oh, wow, this feels really good. And knowing that in the past, my family has had family reunions, but it was at like
a park
or a hotel and like having a home to share that. I was able to expose myself to that. And sometimes that's the thing that's a disconnect. I've experienced something one way, you've experienced, and we never really got to embrace each other's like way of living or celebrating or experiencing things, and you have to be open to that.
Like my aunt and uncle Rhonda and Steve, they purchased a home with intent to have large gatherings for families.
But you told me that like before we went there, and so I'm going with the filter of looking at
That's what this property is for.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think people don't do that. They just go, oh, we're going to my aunt and uncle's house.
And it's a big house.
It's a big house.
Yeah. They bought a big house so it could serve the family and they could host. And whether it's a wedding or a family reunion, like there's room for trailers to come. Like we've had many family things there. And I just thought, well, as we get older, I want to experience that too, because I've seen it, as to your point. So another thing, we were looking at a property today and we had to learn about probate, right? Things being tied up. And basically it's like, this is the importance of insurance. So if I value, let's say we're dating and we're having this conversation, I'm like, oh yeah, I have a life insurance policy and I have renter's insurance. And you're the kind of guy that's like, insurance is stupid. It's a scam. Okay. Red flag, because if I die, my property gets paid off and then it doesn't go into probate. And then my beneficiaries are sitting there for years without reaping the benefits of me being a homeowner. Right. And so just having those conversations to know, like, if you are dating, let's say you're dating, you're not even married yet, and you own a home. What happens if you die? What happens if you get divorced? Like, is there insurance? Is there a prenup? Like, there has to be conversations that you have when it comes to money, when you start to join things. The next thing I'll say is, like, what's a good rule of thumb for if you do buy a home together or you do move in together? Do you keep separate bank accounts? Because that has been coming up a lot lately. My brother's recently married. My sister is getting married. Some have a new brother-in-law. And here's what, like, that couple does. They're like, okay, so we contribute to a household fund. We pay half of the mortgage, half of the bills. Everybody does half. And then I go, so what happens when one of you gets a raise and the other doesn't? Then what? Because I don't know about you, but I plan on making a lot more money in my lifetime. And so if you want to just stay and, come home, have a couple of beers and chill every night and watch your shows, but I'm over here hustling and working hard, I'm going to outgrow this whole equal thing. And it's going to be a problem. Why? Because I want to go vacation and I want to go explore the world and I want to go experience new adventures. And now you're on some fixed income and you're like, well, if you paid more of the mortgage, then because you make more, then I'd have more money to spend on the vacation. Well, either way, that means I'm paying for extra shit, right? So money can become a big problem, I think, if you keep everything divided. But then if it's together, are you asking for permission? And then I could be throwing in your face, like, let's be real, 90% of that money's mine.
And that's
then
a
it's
real
a problem.
Thing. That's a real thing.
So this happens all the time. So I need for you to DM us, to write a review, to tell me, like, do you have joint accounts? Do you have separate accounts? And what works for you? I want to know what works and what does not. So if you message or leave a review and say, my husband and I have separate accounts, but we pay bills from the mutual account and it's a shit show, I want to know why.
And then with that also, then you end up having like separate investments, like, oh, well, I have extra money.
That's my house over there.
I have extra money. This is what you make. So so all of a sudden you're managing and measuring your contributions to this relationship, and then it's going to really cause an issue because at the end of the day, someone's going to feel like they contributed more. Right. And so having that conversation of like, what are our plans together? What are your plans for your career? What are your plans for maybe somebody staying home, or maybe like, hey, I aspire to do this and you aspire to, like, you have to find a way to where it to become something that is not discussed about who's contributing more. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be really hard to have an equal, like, we make exactly the same amount, so all things are going to be perfect. No, so it's going to be outweighed. But I think it's important, though. That's where you have to say, well, our union is more important, right? And I'm willing to, like, this is what you're living full out. You're not trying to like prepare. Like people say, well, if the marriage doesn't work out, at least I'm taking care of it. Well, you're preparing for your marriage not to work out. And I know that sounds silly.
But you do have to have a contingency plan.
I don't think, to me, I think the contingency plan is like, we're going to stay married forever.
But we didn't always have that. It was like, okay, worst case scenario, like what would happen?
Yeah. But I think I think that's hard to do, like to live full out and to have a full marriage where you're pouring everything you have into
Go
it.
all in.
Because you got to go all in.
Yeah.
I don't think you can hedge your bet and say, well, I'm going to go all in, but it's not going to work out. Now, if you've got signs where someone is like, showing you that they don't want to be in this, then I think you got to start building like a plan because this person is showing you that. But I think if you got to go all in. And I think people are afraid of that because they don't want to be burned or hurt. But that's life.
But like, let's just say that in this situation, like I'll use you're earning more and I've decided to stay home with the kids. But we started our foundation as like, oh, we're separate, we're contributing. I don't know, that could become a big issue, especially if I'm not contributing. Now I'm at the mercy of you. And then I find out you're out looking at properties and you don't tell me.
Right.
And you're like, why would I tell you? Like, it's my money. Oh my God. That's like a nightmare. Get out of that marriage. That is so scary for me to even say. That's scary.
But and I think to me, that's not a money thing. Mm-hmm. That's finding a
communication
person.
thing.
That's finding a person that like sees marriage the same way you do, or sees your relationship the same way as you do. If you do, like those are signs, and I think you gotta, like, in your dating phase, you gotta ask those questions. Like, if you made more money, would you think it's okay? Or maybe put on you. So if I made more money, do you think it's okay if I start looking at property without you because it's going to be my money? And if that person says, sure.
Right.
I think that's a good idea. You go, I was just tricking you. That was a good question.
Or like, let's say we said in the next 2 years, if Jasmine owns a property, let's say she gets a townhouse, right? And then she gets 2 properties. And then now she's going to be 30. She gets married. I think we would advise her, those are your properties. Like, you are bringing those to the relationship. Especially if we had anything to do with helping for that. Like, that is separate from your marriage. That's not going to be counted. If for whatever reason it doesn't work out, like, protect yourself. But we didn't have that situation because we were both coming to the table with no property.
Yeah.
But I would want her to sit down and say, hey, just so we are clear, we're going to build a life together, but these properties are mine. Like, if anything happens.
Because my family put into that.
Right. Does that make you selfish?
I don't think it makes you selfish. I think that there's you putting on a hat of like, that's business.
I'm advocating for myself.
Right. That's business. And, you see stories of people who've taken advantage of other people, or they found ways to take someone's property by doing certain things. And I think if your family invested in this, then I think that there's a way of you saying, hey, this is separate. We can build things together, but this is separate. But it's a touchy thing. And I think you got to have an open dialogue.
But if they're together for 20 years,
right,
I don't give a shit. Like, I mean, fine.
Do what you want.
Like, let's say in that situation, they're together for 20 years. They have kids. He's the stay-at-home dad. I get it. Like, you helped contribute, and you made sacrifices. Okay, let's just hope that none of that happens. But
these are real things.
These are real things that our listeners go through. They might be going through right now. Lots of our listeners are going through divorces, and dividing the assets is really difficult. So I'm just curious, if that's you, please take the time to DM us or leave a review and just let us know, how are you dividing the assets? What would you do differently? What is your advice to younger couples so that these 6 categories don't become the demise of their relationship? So again, there's savings, earnings, debt, credit, taxes, and insurance. Those are the main 6 categories I think you need to talk about when it comes to your finances before you find yourself in a committed relationship.
Yeah, and I think when we say earnings, would that include like investments?
Yeah, that's like any sort of investment, property, but it's also it's your ability to think that you can control your income, right? So like, hey, we're newly married and we've got a growing family, like, hey, we got to earn more. If you're the kind of person that's just like, well, they won't give me a raise at work. Okay, can you get another job? Like, is what you're doing warranting another raise? Can you save so that way you can invest? Like, can you take a course to expand your skills? Like, several ways to increase your earnings, but I will say lots of people don't think that that's in their control. So if that's the case, go to the Copelands is
wearethecopelands.com.
JanelleCopeland.com. Look for this financial workshop. It'll be the best $29 you've ever spent, just to get a good, like, solid perspective on how you can increase your earnings, how you can get out of debt, how you can increase your credit score. And then, you know, hopefully this episode gave you some tips on how you can talk about it with the person that you love.
Yeah. And I think that the last thing I'll kind of say is, the key to all this is really sitting down and saying, let's talk about, like, our life and what things do we want to share, as, like, what are we going to value together, so that we can build a vision for our life that we can aspire and work intentionally to try to obtain. And I think that that's a beautiful thing to do through achievement. And I think that you have to, like, understand the dynamics of that relationship and know that at times there's going to be leading and there's going to be following when it comes to aspiring and moving your career or your business along. But just know that you're doing it together and you're a team. I think that is the first thing you have to kind of establish. And I think when you do that really well, then everything else kind of works itself out. And
I agree with you. I'll just add that every season, every year, like in January for our 17th anniversary, we reestablish, like, what do we care about in this season of life? And we establish the fact that we will no longer be buying things for our kids. Like, you don't get Christmas presents, you don't get birthday presents. We're not buying you things. We're creating memories with you. And so we Googled, you know, how many countries are there in the world that we haven't seen? 195 of them. How many can we see between the ages of 42 and 80? You know, like, how many adventures can we create? And so we're looking to hopefully explore the rest of the world by building wealth through investment properties and business earnings. And then also we are committed to spending that money on travel, experiences, and memories with our kids. So if you don't find out, like, what you care about and what you value now, go do that. And then also be okay with readjusting that contract and renegotiating and reestablishing, like, what your goals are as a couple moving forward. I'd say every year.
Negotiations is you got to compromise. Like, things that you say, okay, well, I care about this, but not as much as you care about it in this situation. I want to see you get that. I want you to have that time, right? Like, all those things, they're going to take compromises, and understanding that, like, if you compromise, the other person will compromise, and you will work it out and you'll share those things together.
Amen.
Amen.
I hope this was helpful for you. If you could share this with someone that's maybe getting married, maybe getting ready to enter a serious relationship, we'd be so grateful. And leave us a comment or a review on iTunes. Let us know what you do with your partner with finances. And we will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much.
Push through.